say about it, as we get away from the draft a little bit. Were there any other picks that really stood out to either of you as really questionable or odd?
I'm going to say this. I thought the Cleveland Browns, we're going to talk about this in a second, but I thought the Cleveland Browns had an opportunity to really make a splash in the draft, but in a different way. I'm not that high on Trent Richardson. Why is the name of the running back escaping me now? The greatest running back of all time played for the Cleveland Browns, Jim Brown. He came out and said he didn't see anything special when it came to
Trent Richardson.
And I tend to agree because if you look at Trent Richardson, sure, there were some games where he makes some amazing moves and makes some guys miss, but the year before that, he couldn't really sniff the field in front of Mark Ingram if he's that great. And Mark Ingram is kind of doing okay with the New Orleans Saints. In my opinion, if they would have went in this order, you take why am I drawing the blank? The kid, you take the wide receiver Blackman from Oklahoma State. You take it with the third pick. You then draft his quarterback, which is what they did with the 22nd pick. And then you take a running back in the top part of the second round. Because I don't think there's a significant difference between Trent Richardson and what I saw from someone like Lamar Miller, who went in the fourth round, or the kid from Boise State who went at the end of the first round. If Trent Richardson is a bust, then he's the only playmaker that's on that team. But we kind of know what we're getting when you get Blackman and you get Whedon on the field at the same time. Whedon is older, has a strong arm. He's ready to play now. Blackman is not Julio Jones or A.J. Green, but he's like a notch below. But in that offense, with those two, plus a running back of some kind, that would have been outstanding.
If they hadn't taken Richardson with that pick, it's very likely they would have been able to get David Wilson, the running back from Virginia Tech, who's actually the final player taken in the first round. And he's a strong running back. I think that's interesting. I'll tell you, I'd be lying if I said I watched all the Alabama games this year. I didn't. I watched a few of them. And when I watch tape on Trent Richardson, and what I don't see is the explosive speed. He runs like a person who's bulkier than he really is to me. And it seems to me like the trend in the NFL lately has been away from the big bulky back who carries the ball all the time and towards more flexible wide receivers who have more speed. Even a guy like Adrian Peterson, you watch on tape, who is one of the few feature backs left in the NFL. That guy has explosive speed. The big bulky backs get injured or they just can't accomplish very much. You saw what happened when Turner lost a step with the Falcons and didn't have that same amount of explosive speed. I do think that would have been interesting. I think the whole trading 4 to 3 picks is really a weird thing. Somebody must have been trying to come up
to
get Trent Richardson.
That Minnesota sold it well that Jacksonville or someone else was coming up to take Trent Richardson.
Yeah.
Hey, they leveraged. They got picked for it. Cleveland had a ton of picks because of the Julio Jones trade. And I think we probably should talk about that at some point, how that kind of plays out because of who they took. But
I'd like to hit you with 5 running backs that were good options in the draft.
Okay.
That might have solved this. There are questions about Trent Richardson.
Sure.
So let's look at 5 other running backs that I think were chosen in good places in this draft. The first is LaMichael James. Got some issues, but strong performer at Oregon, excellent program, touchdown machine, undersized to play running back in the NFL, but in that San Francisco offense, they'll find him some ways to get the ball, that's for sure.
Frank Gore not a beacon of health.
That also true. And as Eric pointed out, Lamar Miller, great pick by the Dolphins. The U, staying there in Miami. Another strong performer, 9 touchdowns last year. The next one, and here's a surprise one. Chris Rainey, Florida's back/receiver, going to the Steelers. Rainey's a good player. I don't think he's the next Piercy Harvin. I don't think he's the next Randall L. But he'll make some plays, and Pittsburgh will fit him in there. Pittsburgh's got a lot of running back problems.
Yeah.
So we'll see him on the field. Last 2. Dan Herron, Ohio State, going in the 6th round to the Bengals. Dan Herron was a solid performer on a good team. That's worth taking a 6th-round gamble on. And then lastly, under the radar, Michael Smith from Utah State. A little short, but stout. And I think that a lot of those teams out there in the West or in the Western conferences get overlooked sometimes. And I think that we could see him performing pretty well for Tampa Bay.
Well, and if you look at the running back position in the NFL over the course of the last several years, we've seen the triumph of what I would call the Mike Shanahan theory of running backs, which was why I grew to hate Shanahan as a fantasy football owner, is whenever you would pick the running back that seemed like they were going to get the bulk of the carries. When Shanahan was coaching the Broncos, what you saw is Shanahan using running back by committee. And at the time, I thought that was kind of weird. But it's become the standard operating procedure in the NFL. You have very few feature backs anymore. You have a lot more of this running back by committee situation. And you have guys like Darren Sproles, who turns into a force to be reckoned with, even though he is, like we've said with a bunch of these running backs you just talked about, a little undersized, not the sort of big, bulky feature back. To me, one of the lessons of the NFL is, over the past several years, is the decline in value of the running back position, the increase of running back by committee, and the fact that you don't necessarily need Adrian Peterson to get to the Super Bowl. And in fact, empirically, Adrian Peterson might actually prevent you from getting to the Super Bowl because you focus your offense so much around him to the detriment of the passing game, which is where so many teams have been doing well.
I'm not saying that Trent Richardson is a bad pick at 3, but he ain't Peterson. And, if he, ironically, Jim Brown also said he reminds him of Emmitt Smith, and I'm not saying that, I'm not sure if Jim Brown says he hates Emmitt Smith, but I don't know. I just feel like because of the Shanahan theory that you can find a running back anywhere, it would have been nice for them to kind of go with the triplets effect, their version of the triplets, and they probably could have gotten maybe 3 top or first round graded players, but that's my opinion.
I mean, they just have so many problems.
They do.
Admittedly, they did address a lot of fundamental issues in the rest of the draft, but there was also not much. In fact, there's Trent Richardson, there's Brandon Weeden. Mm-hmm. So I guess you've got your beginnings of your offense there. At least that's what your theory is. Mm-hmm. And then there aren't any offensive playmakers, even potential offensive playmakers in the rest of the draft until you get to the unfortunately named Brad Smelly with the final pick that they had in round 7. So who's a tight end? I just don't know. I did think that was weird too. But so many people are high on Richardson. I guess they're seeing something I'm not.